Hello everyone, welcome to Media and Information Literacy class. For this day's discussion, we will have the discussion of information literacy. Here are our objectives. First, define information needs, can locate, access, assess, organize, and communicate information. Next is to demonstrate ethical use of information. And then last is to create an activity matrix applying the components of information. So in this lesson, we will be discussing the following. First is we will strengthen the definition of information. Next, we will review what is literacy. We will also discuss what is information literacy and what is the importance of being an information literate individual. Also, we will be discussing 5 components of information literacy, the ethical use of information, and the different ways on using citation. So let us start. So let us define information. Well, information is the data that has been collected, processed, and interpreted in order to be presented in a usable form. In media world, information is often used to describe knowledge of specific events or situations that has been gathered or received by communication, intelligence, or news reports. So every data that has been collected, including video clips, including interviews, audio clips, statements from somebody, including sounds, including symbols, including experiences. So those are all examples of information. While literacy is the understanding of a specific subject. So when we connect information and literacy, so it simply means that information literacy is our understanding on how to use information. But to strengthen the definition, information literacy is a means to express personal ideas, develop arguments, refute the opinions of others, learn new things, or simply identify the truth or factual evidence about a topic. So here are the importance of being an information literate individual. So an information literate individual can first use the data to achieve a particular objective. So as an information literate individual, it is our objective to use information aligned with the objectives that we have set. Next is to access information ethically. So as an information literate individual, it is your responsibility to access information ethically, respectfully, and with giving proper credit to its original source. Next is to use the information lawfully. So we have to be aware that there are information that needs to be asked permission from the owner or that needs to be credited by the specific owner. So we need to credit the information based from the original owner. So we will credit it from the original owner. And then aside from that, an information literate can collect the data into one's learning base. Next is to make the information useful and efficient. So how do we make information useful and efficient? So in making information useful and efficient, we are ensuring that our information attains the set objectives. At the same time, it gives us an unexpected result that we have think of, and at the same time, it gives us good results. Next is to assess the data and sources. So aside from accessing data ethically, it is our responsibility to assess data, meaning to evaluate data and to evaluate the source, whether it provides factual information or not. So here are the information literate required skills. So in order to be an information literate, so you need to have these skills. First is to be able to find resources. Next is to be able to find information. So example, in using URL bookmarking from a website, finding across multiple sources, and understanding and being able to locate what's more important and produce an importance ranking. So when we say being able to find information, we are aware that there are lots of informations in various media sources, such as the library, the internet, and we can also use broadcast media. So in order for us to level the importance of this information, so we will first get what is nearest to our objective, and then next followed by those information that are somehow related, and then down to the least important information. So but even the least important information in the long run may still serve its purpose depending on how your study will go. Next is ethical and responsible use of information. So as an information literate individual, so one of the required skills of an information literate individual is to be ethical and responsible in terms of using information. So how are we going to be ethical and responsible? So if we know that that information doesn't belong to us, or we do not produce nor own the information, so it is rightful to give proper credit to the rightful owner. So on the succeeding slides or on the next subtopics, we will discuss how you will cite your sources or how you will give credit to bibliography. Next is to communicate one's information and then to be able to manage your information. Another thing is to be able to examine results, or how you will examine results. So first, check if the information is appropriate to the question or task given. So of course, you will be bombarded with lots of information. So you have to make sure, or you have to check if the information is appropriate or will answer your question or will satisfy the task that was given to you. Next is to verify the authenticity and the source. So you have to verify if the information is factual or not. Next is consistency of information given. So the reason why you need to check various sources, because you also want to check the consistency of the information, because there will be instances that the definition or the discussion of a particular topic is different from the other. So we need to check whether this particular source gives us an accurate information. So we need to check its consistency if other sources agrees with the prior source that you have used. Next is the rate of having errors in the result. So you need also to check the rate of having errors in the result. So there could be a certain instance that it commits lots of errors simply because the information you used was incorrect. So you also need to check the rate of errors in your result. Let us now have the 5 components of information literacy. So these are the steps in order to create an information matrix. So first, we need to identify our problem, or we need to identify what kind of information that we will find. So that's identify. Next is to find the information that we need in our study or in our research. Next is to evaluate the information that you have gathered, whether it is factual or not. Next is to apply the information to our study. And the next, of course, it's very important to acknowledge the sources of your information. So let us start discussing each component one by one. So let us start first with identify. So it is about identifying the nature and extent of the needed information. So in this stage, your purpose is to identify the kind and the nature of information that you need. And also, it is in this stage you will identify the extent of the information that you need. So of course, you will identify your research, you will set your title. So from there, you will identify what kind of information you will need. So here are the example activities in this particular stage. First is writing a thesis statement. So when we write a thesis statement, so thesis statement is a single sentence that discusses the main idea or the main objective of your research or your study. So once you have identified, or once you have written your thesis statement, so from there you have already identified the kind of information that you need. Next is creating a timeline of plan to complete a research paper. So aside from writing a thesis statement, so it is also included in the identify stage, the creation of timeline of plan to complete a research paper, because from there you will write down the step-by-step process, and then from there you will know what kind of information you need per chapter of your research paper. Next is differentiating primary sources from secondary information. So here, you will now identify what primary sources you will use and what are the secondary sources that you will use, because you have already identified, or you have already set the kind of study that you would want to pursue. Next, we have find. So it is about finding information effectively and efficiently. So in this stage, you are now going to find the information, locate the information that you need in your task. So example activities for this stage is you are locating a book in a library using its call number. So call number is the order of that particular book according to its subject in accordance with the Dewey Decimal System. Next is choosing best keywords or phrases in searching online or in library database. So in this particular stage, you are now typing the information, or that you are now typing the kind of information using keywords, let's say for example in Google or in your internet browser, or you are typing the keywords in your library database so that it will give you the right book that you can use for your study. Next is evaluate. So it is the ability to evaluate information and its sources critically. So in this stage, we already have the information with us. So it is now our task as an information literate individual to assess whether the information that we have collected is factual or not, or will it suit the objective that we have set. So those are the things that we need to consider in this particular stage. Examples will be, first is to review the multiple point of view to construct a generalized opinion. So let's say for example that you were provided lots of information. So of course, there are different point of views per information. So what you will do is that you will review this point of views that you have gathered, and then with the purpose of constructing a generalized or a singular opinion based from the multiple POVs or multiple information that you have gathered from various sources. Next is to explore different sources of information to understand a concept. So, of course, you won't settle with one information. You will look for other sources in order to connect that or to compare and contrast that information, whether it is consistent or whether it provides a different discussion. Next is analyzing the logic and structure of arguments from speeches. Let's say, for example, you have already located an information and it is now your task to analyze the logic, the structure, and even the tone of arguments from speeches in order to create your conclusion or your generalized opinion. Next is apply. It is the ability to apply information to achieve a purpose. So it is now your task to apply the information in your study or in your task. So once you have finished collecting the information, you have already finished assessing and evaluating the information, reviewing its authenticity, checking if it's factual or not. So you are now sure of applying this in your task. So this is that particular stage. Examples could be the following. First is to paraphrase a quote to support an argument. So because you have already evaluated that this particular quote supports your argument or supports your study, so it is your task or it is your responsibility to paraphrase the information for it not to be identical from the original source. And then of course, you need to cite its source, but we will do that on the next stage. Next is to integrate an article into a part of a research paper. So you have already collected the information, you have already gathered, and you have already assessed its authenticity. Now it's your time to arrange this information in a paragraph. So you will now integrate an article, or you will now create an essay out of the information that you have collected. So you will create a synthesis. Next is to download the file and incorporate it in a panel discussion. So once, let's say for example, I am discussing to you already this lesson. Because I can now discuss this to you simply because I am done with thinking what topic I will discuss. I am already done searching of the information that I need in this lesson. And then I am already done with checking whether this information provides consistent details. So now it's my time to incorporate it or present it to you. So this is exactly what I am doing now. And if you will compare this in this particular stage, so I am already in the applying stage. And last, of course, we have the acknowledge stage or acknowledge. So it is the ability to acknowledge the sources of used information. It also includes the understanding of ethical, legal, and societal issues surrounding information. So you are done applying the information. You are done already with executing your task. Of course, you are aware that the information that you have used belongs to its rightful owner. So it's important that you will cite your source, or you will give credit to the sources of the information. So we have various techniques in order for us to credit the information or to cite our sources. We can do bibliographical entries at the last part of every chapter in our study, let's say. Or we can do in-text citations, wherein in the first part of a paragraph that we use the information, we will cite the last name of the author and then the year when the information was published. So example activities includes, just like what I said, creating in-text citations and bibliographies. Next is to understand plagiarism and its grounds. Next is utilizing copyright, Creative Commons, public domains, and fair use guidelines. So since we have already mentioned copyright, public domain, and fair use, so let us give a short discussion of these three because we will discuss this thoroughly when we reach lesson 7. So copyright. Copyright protects owner of his right for use and distribution of original work for a lifetime plus 50 years. So this particular Law Encrypted Act protects the owner for his right to use the information by others or to distribute his original work for his lifetime plus 50 years. So there are certain instances that we are not simply allowed to copy the information because it is registered in copyright law. So we need first to ask permission from the owner, or we need to pay the royalty fee in order to use that information in our task. So that is how strict copyright is. Next is public domain. So this happens when a copyright expires and the original owner, or let's say the descendant of the owner, fails to renew the copyright franchise. So this is what will happen after the copyright expires. So after the copyright expires, it will be available for public domain and can be used for free. And then we also have fair use. So let's say, for example, that there are informations that we have taken from a book, and then we will use this in our research, and we will also use this in teaching and in discussion. So there are instances that it's our call if we will ask permission or not. simply because we will use this for teaching and for educational and study purposes. So this is where fair use enters in. So fair use sets the limitation and exception to exclusive right granted by copyright law. So there is no need to ask permission, but take note, you need to use information for criticisms, for teaching, for research, and for news reporting. But in return, you need to cite the source for you not to be charged of copyright infringement. So this is what fair use applies. So there could be instances that we copy information from internet and we do not personally ask permission from the owner. That is because of fair use. Because we will use the information for study purposes, for research purposes, or for teaching purposes. So there's no need to personally ask information from the owner. So just to cite the source of the information is enough. Let us now discuss the ethical use of information. So ethical use of information includes the problems with the intellectual property, proper use, freedom of information, security of information, and plagiarism. So plagiarism is a wrongful appropriation and stealing and publication of another author's language, thoughts, ideas, or expressions and the representation of them as your own original work. So what do we mean by plagiarism? As simple as this. Let's say, for example, let's create an analogy. So plagiarism is like this. You borrow a pen from a friend. And then that friend is generous enough, he lends you his pen. And then after 1 week, you failed to return back the pen. And then as days go by, you make it as your personal belonging. Okay, question. Is that fair? Or is that right? No, isn't it? So that is just like plagiarism. So it's like you get information from a source, you incorporate it in your work, you paraphrase it, you reword it, and then you submitted it, and then once it was read, everything was all yours. There was no traces of citing your sources in your write-up. So that is exactly a ground for plagiarism. And did you know that nowadays, once you are caught or once you are charged of plagiarism, you'll be charged of lawsuit and you will be asked to pay a lawsuit of, if I'm not mistaken, 100,000 pesos, depending on the grounds of your plagiarized work. So that is how serious plagiarism is. So as simple as this, plagiarism is stealing one's work. So that is plagiarism. So once you get an author's language or thoughts without giving credit to the original author, so that is exactly plagiarism. But how can you be safe of plagiarism? So you can paraphrase the work, still you can cite the source, even rewarding it, still you need to cite the source if you are aware that it is somebody's work. So here are the guidelines for ethical use of information. First, respect the author's intention. So it is very important to never use information in a way that it's different from the author's intention. Of course, when you gather information, you need to be aware of the main idea of that information. What is that information all about? Is it really connected with your study? Or you are just assuming that that information will suit your study simply because the construction of words might suit your study. So you need to understand the whole context of the information before you incorporate it with your work. Next, do not change the author's main idea. So although it is not always necessary to quote an entire passage to make your point, make sure that you have not changed the author's main idea through selective quoting or use of ellipsis or the 3-dot punctuation. So of course, you already knew the author's intention, so do not change the author's main idea. Stick to the author's main idea as long as it is connected with your work. So you make sure first that it is really connected with your work, so there you can incorporate it in your research paper. Just make sure that you are not changing or you are not deviating from the main idea of the information, as well as the idea set by the author on that information. Next, do not ignore information that conflicts with your study. So this is where argument happens. It is not ethical to prove your thesis by ignoring well-known information that conflicts with or refutes it. A well-argued paper confronts such evidence. So you should not neglect those information that conflicts your study because it strengthens your paper. So the more conflict it gives your study, the more evidence you need, and the more it will strengthen your research study, or the more it will strengthen your paper. Next, of course, context matters. So always be aware of the context, example, historical, sociological, cultural, etc., in which your source document was produced. So you need to understand as to what context does that information use. Let's say, for example, your study is about using computers for online classes, and then you were given an information. Let's say the information talks about the usage of information in an office base. You have to check first if that information will really agree with what you would like to prove, because it follows or it has a different context. So you have to make sure that the information that you have gathered follows the context of your study. Or let's say it is related to the context of your study. And although you should keep these guidelines in mind when researching and writing your papers, you may run into a few gray areas, such as texts that seemingly contradict their arguments. So there are certain instances that there are texts that are contradicting their own arguments. So you need to be aware of that. And in order for you to strengthen that, you need to do thorough research. Next, texts that contain information that can be used to support a thesis not addressed by the author. So it is very important that we should also address these gray areas as we run through researching information that we will need for our task. Now let us have the different types of citation used for information. First, we have the American Psychological Association format, which is APA format used for education and scientific researches. And then we also have the Modern Language Association, or the MLA format, used for humanities research. And then we also have the third one, which is the Chicago and Turabian format, which is used for business, history, and fine arts. So we will discuss the tips on how to use APA format as your format for bibliographical entries and for in-text citations. Okay, so let's say, for example, you have gathered an information from a book. So you will start it with the last name of the author, and then the first letter of the name of the author, period, and then if the middle initial is available, so include that, and then enclose in an open and close parenthesis the year the information was published, and then next you put period, proceed with the title of article, enclose it in a quotation mark, period, and then next is the title of the book or the title of that particular reference where you get the information, and then you followed by the publishing house or the place of publication, and then page number. So I have here an example information. So let's say an information is about citation and referencing, and it was taken from Reading and Writing textbook. Okay, and the reading and writing textbook was authored by Mr. Edel Vargas, and this was published in Arizona State University. So this is how you will do APA format for your bibliographical entry. So first is the last name, and then the initials of the first name and the middle initial, followed by the year of publication. Next is citation and referencing as the title of the information. Next is the title of the book, followed by the publishing house, and then the page number if it's available. Let's say, for example, there is no title of the information. You just use a book, and there was no title given. So you just omit the title of the article, so you may proceed with the title of the book, following the publishing house, and then the page number. So just follow the sequence of how you will arrange the entries in your bibliography. Next, what if an information was taken from the internet? So first, you will cite the author. So same with the previous one. So last name is complete, followed by the initials of the first name and the middle name, and then date of retrieval or year of retrieval. So this actually means that it is the date when you gather or when you retrieve the information. So let's say that you have gathered the information last 2018, and then you have taken the information from a blog or an online article, and then retrieved from, include the site link or the URL. So let's have an example. So let's say, for example, you use an article written by Mr. Edel Vargas in an online source, and it is entitled "Students Are Not Machines, How True." So this is how you will do APA format if the information was taken from the internet. So this time, let us discuss how you will use APA format for in-text citation. So it's simple. You just have to give the last name of the author, just the last name, and then enclose the year in the open and close parentheses. So we have here examples. So if, let's say, for example, the author is only one, so you will write the last name of the author and then the year. Or if the author is two, so write the last name of the two authors and then the year. And then if you would like to be specific, you may write the last name of the author, the year, and then the page number where the information was taken. And then if authors are more than one, let's say 5 authors, so you will write the first author on the book and then follow it with et al. Et al means et alia, which is a Latin term for and others, meaning when you put it in somebody's name, it means Vargas and others. So meaning, aside from the previous author, there are other authors who co-authored the book. So you will write this form and then follow it with the year of publication. And then you can now proceed with the actual text. So this is how you will do in-text citations in research papers. Not just in research papers. If you are writing articles and essays, you may also follow this format as well. In order for your paper to be more informative, at the same time, in order for your paper and in order for your claims to be credible, simply because you used other sources. This time, let us now discuss how different people practices information literacy. First, let us have students. So students assess information to broaden their knowledge, evaluate the credibility of information, carefully chooses information to achieve an objective, and etc. So as students, you need to practice information literacy through assessing the information that you have gathered, and with the purpose of to broaden or to widen your knowledge base. Next is to evaluate the credibility of the information. Even the source of information, you need to evaluate it as well. And then you need to carefully choose information to achieve a particular task or to achieve a particular objective. Let's say for your research, for your task. So you need to first set an objective, and then you need to choose the information that suits your task as well as that hits your objective. And then for us teachers, how do we apply information literacy? So we facilitate learning and enhance students' knowledge and skills through accurate information. So as teachers, it is our responsibility to provide our students a factual information, and at the same time, it is also our responsibility to teach you how to use this information ethically and efficiently. So before we start our teaching, we are bombarded with various information. So it is our task and it is our job to make sure that the information that we are providing you are factual and it undergone series of evaluation. Also, we have medical practitioners. So one of the ways on how medical practitioners practices information literacy is that they keep track of patients' health record. So they store the information they have gathered from their patients, because in the long run, it will be useful for future consultations, and at the same time, it will be useful for another series of tests. For lawyers, relevant and complete information through cases and evidence are used. So for lawyers, it is important that they should use relevant and complete information through cases and evidences. And then for journalists, secure information for news. And that for journalists and reporters, it is important that they are gathering information firsthand, usually first-hand information, and if that information is taken from a secondary source, they need to ensure first the authenticity of the information to, of course, avoid providing fake news. And then for artists, thorough research of their craft or thorough research of their masterpiece adds meaning and depth to their artwork. And then for scientists, seeks new information through experiments and thorough research. So for scientists, information literacy is very important, because in science they follow the scientific method, and one part of that is to gather information. Of course, you need to gather information that will support the problem that you have identified, and at the same time, this information should give them good results. So let us summarize the lesson. So earlier we discussed information literacy, information and literacy. Next is the importance of information literate individual. And then we also discussed the 5 components of information literacy, followed by the ethical use of information and the different types of information citation, as well as the usage of APA format in in-text citations and bibliographical entries, and how information literacy is practiced by various people. So I hope you find this information worthwhile, and I hope you find this study meaningful. And I also hope that in your future studies, you will apply what you have learned from this lesson. And that's it for our today's discussion. So see you again for our next lesson in Media and Information Literacy. Thank you and goodbye.